The great crusade, oh, you could feel it thrumming through the stars themselves, a relentless pulse of human ambition. Whole sectors fell before us, worlds brought into compliance, alien empires shatter like glass. It was a tide, a glorious, unstoppable tide washing across the galaxy, cleansing it of darkness and disorder, and at its heart him, the Emperor, our Father. His vision was pure, absolute humanity ascended, united under one banner, free from the terrors that lurked in the void. It was breathtaking, truly breathtaking. His sons, the Primarchs, gods walking among mortals, each a masterpiece of genetic engineering forged for war and leadership. They were magnificent, terrifying, beautiful. Each commanded their own legion, the Legiones Astartes, superhuman warriors, clad in ceramite and faith. They were the mailed fist of the Emperor, the instruments of his will. Victory followed them like a shadow. They preached the imperial truth, scorning superstition, promising reason and enlightenment. They were hope made manifest, and among these demigods one shone brightest. Horus Lupercal, first found, first among equals. His charisma was a physical force, drawing loyalty like a magnet draws iron. His strategic brilliance was unmatched, his courage legendary. He didn't just command, he inspired. To fight beside him, to hear his voice boom across the Vox, it was to feel invincible. He wasn't just a Primarch, he was the Emperor's right hand, his favored son. You could see it in the way the Emperor looked at him, a pride reserved only for Horus. So it was no surprise, yet still a moment of profound awe, when the Emperor bestowed upon Horus the mantle of War Master. The entirety of the great crusade entrusted to him. Imagine that weight, the hopes of humanity, the destiny of a species resting on his shoulders. Terra itself seemed to hold its breath. The Emperor was returning home, he said, to pursue a project of ultimate importance, something vital for the future he envisioned. He left the final conquests, the consolidation, the glorious culmination of his dream to Horus, to the War Master. We stood then, didn't we, at the absolute zenith. The galaxy was ours for the taking. Unity felt inevitable, tangible. Enlightenment wasn't just a promise, it was the dawn breaking. Horus led us onward, the Crusader, finely tuned instrument in his hands. Victories piled upon victories. But then Davin, a cursed moon orbiting a cursed world. Compliance was messy there, pockets of stubborn resistance, clinging to old foul beliefs. Horus, ever leading from the front, ever trusting his legion, he confronted one of these warlords, a desperate, cornered creature, and it struck him not with a bolt shell, not with an energy blast, but with a blade, an ancient rusted thing steeped in something vile. It pierced his magnificent armor, the artificer-crafted plate that had shrugged off titanic blows, and bit deep into his flesh. Just a scratch, we thought at first, but Horus, he fell, the War Master, the invincible, crashing to the blood-soaked mud. Panic seized us, pure cold terror. His life signs flickered. Unstable apothecaries worked frantically, their diagnostics screaming failure. The poison wasn't natural, it writhed in his veins, defying imperial medicine, defying reason itself. His skin turned gray, his breathing shallow, and labored. The greatest of us was dying on some forgotten moon. Desperation makes you grasp at shadows. His closest sons, the morn evil, fractured by grief and fear, heard whispers of a place, a temple ancient, hidden deep within Davin's jungles, a place rumored to hold power, forbidden power, but whispered to offer healing. What choice did they have? Watched their father die, or defy the imperial truth itself? They chose defiance. They carried his failing body into that suffocating darkness. The temple, oh throne, the temple, it wasn't stone, it felt like flesh, warm and pulsing. The air clung thick and wet, smelling of old blood and decayed incense, strained symbols crawled across the walls, seeming to shift and writhe in the flickering torchlight. The silence wasn't empty, was heavy, expectant, alive with malice. Priests in tattered robes, their eyes glazed with madness, awaited them. They chanted in tongues that scraped against the mind, promising salvation. They laid Horus upon a slab slick with something best not examined. They performed rites that twisted the stomach, invoked names that curdled the soul, and Horus, he breathed. Color returned to his face, the wound closed. He rose, healed, whole. Relief flooded us, a dizzying wave. He was back, our war master lived, but something was wrong, subtle. At first a shadow behind his eyes that hadn't been there before, a tension in his smile, a coldness in his laughter. The poison wasn't gone, it had merely changed form. It had seeped into his soul, a dark seed planted deep and in the quiet moments. The whispers began, not audible, not exactly, more like thoughts that weren't his own, slithering into his mind from the howling void beyond reality, the warp. Its dark gods had noticed him. They saw the crack in the Emperor's brightest jewel, and they poured their venom into it. They showed him visions, horrible, plausible visions, not crude lies, but twisted truths, possibilities magnified into certainties. He saw Terra, but not the seat of reason. He saw golden temples, mountains of skulls, oceans of incense. He saw the Emperor enthroned, distant, bathed in adoration, worshipped as a god, the imperial truth. He had bled for, preached with such fervor, discarded, forgotten superstition reigning supreme. And then he saw us, the Primarchs, the legions, our purpose, fulfilled, our wars won, cast aside, obsolete, discarded like old weapons, left to rust or worse, hunted, purged by the very imperium we built. He saw statues toppled, names erased, histories rewritten. He saw his brothers broken, scattered, forgotten. He saw his own legion, his sons betrayed. They played upon everything he held dear, his immense pride. Was he not the best, the most worthy? Why should he be cast aside? His profound, almost desperate love for his father, had it all been a lie? Was the Emperor just using him, using all of them? And his deepest, darkest fear, the fear of irrelevance, of being forgotten after giving everything, the fear that the future he fought for had no place for warriors like him. The whispers amplified these doubts, nurtured them, turned love into suspicion, pride into resentment, fear into cold, hard certainty. The scales fell from his eyes. The Emperor wasn't the benevolent father guiding humanity. He was a tyrant, a deceiver, building an empire not for mankind, but for his own apotheosis, a godhood that demanded the sacrifice of his own sons. Horus saw the path laid out before him, compliance, conquest, then obsolescence and betrayal. The future wasn't unity and enlightenment. It was a golden cage built on lies, ending in the grave for him and his brothers. The warmth he felt for his father curdled into something cold and sharp. Betrayal demanded betrayal. The dark gods offered power, real power, power to defy fate, power to seize control, power to protect his legion, his brothers, from the Emperor's cold, calculated abandonment. They offered him the galaxy, his galaxy, not as a servant, but as a master. The whispers became promises, seductive, intoxicating promises, power to break the chains he now saw tightening around him, power to forge a new order where the warriors who conquered the stars would rule them, where the Primarchs would be kings, not discarded tools. The warmth of the Emperor's light felt distant, now cold, hypocritical. The embrace of the warp, it promised fire, strength, agency, it promised survival, it promised vengeance. Horus Lupercal stood at the precipice, the favored son, the war master, the brightest hope of humanity. He looked back at the path of light, duty, an inevitable betrayal he looked forward into. The swirling darkness promising dominion, survival, and terrible power. He felt the cold poison in his soul resonate with the promises. From the abyss he remembered the visions of godhood and betrayal. He thought of his legion, his brothers, his pride flared hot and defiant, his love twisted into bitter resolve, his fears solidified into cold purpose. He made his choice. He opened his soul not in prayer to a distant emperor, but in acceptance of the dark. Gifts offered, he reached out and grasped the power of the ruinous bowers. He embraced it. The warmth of corruption flooded him, banishing doubt, filling him with terrible, exhilarating strength. The light of Terra, the light of the imperial truth. He turned his back on it deliberately. Finally, the War Master was lost, and the galaxy began its long, agonizing slide into darkness. You feel sunlight on your face, don't you, warm and golden like it must have felt an ancient at Mora. To imagine such light, now harder still to see the shadow that once bowed to Alduin himself, MIRAAK the First, and the fallen. Think of him young, breathing thin cold air for north or east. Just a boy then, but Akatosh, father of dragons, he heard the echo power within. MIRAAK, he placed a sliver of his own timeless soul within that mortal heart. The dragonborn chosen did MIRAAK know instantly the thrum in his own blood. When dragons roar, that sense of kinship deeper than bone, it called him, pulled him into the isolate temples where scaled gods demanded worship at the edge of the knife, and there amidst the chanting and the fear, MIRAAK didn't just fall to his knees. He rose. Nords groveled beneath draconic lords. MIRAAK stood beside them. The favor of the dragons, it settled on him like heavy robes and colder stone. Can you feel the weight of that the priests wore? Masks hiding their fear, perhaps hiding their ambition. MIRAAK wore his status. He learned the Thum not just as prayer, but as command. His voice cracked stone, riveted dragons where they flew. Dragons looked at him, truly looked at him, and sown out livestock. But a useful beast, an enforcer, his privilege tasted like stolen warmth. He commanded lesser priests, he commanded Nords to sacrifice more for their scaled gods. He even commanded dragons younger, weaker than himself. The bend will already stirred in his soul. He saw the fear in mortal eyes. For him, not just through him, the burden was immense. The potential, oh, the potential whispered constantly. They weren't gods. The thought began at a whisper, then a roar inside the mask. They commanded the skies and fire and ice. Yes, they were ancient, powerful, but they weren't Akatosh. They weren't truly divine, and MIRAAK was dragonborn, born of Akatosh Solstaff. Wasn't he heir to more than mere servitude? Look at him on that windswept peak, watching Alduin blot out the sun, watching his brethren priest scurry, a seed dark and curling took root in his heart. Why kneel? Ambition sharpens, fast became you taste power near his source. MIRAAK began to hunger. He devoured the cult's lore, then spat out the bone. He dug deeper, far deeper, into places where dragons fear to tread, places soaked in the scent of brine and ink and knowledge best left untouched by sane minds. Books bound in leather that remembered screams echoed in his secret chambers. Scrolls whispering truths that warped candle flames. Secrets of the Orbis of Oblivion. Secrets whispered by the DAEDRIC Prince of Foul Titles. Secrets himself, Hermaeus Mora, forbiddens a word like catnip to a dragonborn whose ambition sang louder than any dragon shout. MIRAAK listened. How greedily he listened. The answers weren't in groveling to Alduin. True power, the kind that could break the world eater and elevate the dragonborn into godhood, that lay within the slimy clutches of the gardener of men. He learned a word not taught in dragon temples, a word breath from the void between stars. Yours awful mortal finite, temporary dragon ran the essence of mortality, given voice a weapon forged solely to wound the ageless pride of dragons, and Miraak raised it. Can you imagine the audacity raising that shout born of mortal desperation to throw off the shackles of draconic rule at call like a beacon of defiance on Solstheim's crags beneath skies choked with scale and fury? Miraak stood unleashed his dragon minions born under his stolen ban, will turned against those he once bowed to. He thought his plotting slick hidden under layers of devotion. The dragons weren't gods true. What they were, ancient cunning predators. The smell of betrayal is always sharp like blood on frost. Perhaps a word too loud, perhaps a shard of uneasy essence sensed on the wind, perhaps one of his enslaved dragons finally managed to shake off the echo of his command long enough to scream the warning. It didn't matter. The storm broke. Alduin's fury fell not just on rebels, but on the betrayer closest to his awful throne. The dragon war was no longer merely mortals raging against the impossible. It became a brutal civil war within the cult itself. They sent the best they had. They sent Valak the guardian, another dragon priest, fierce, loyal, perhaps the only soul whose doom truly matched Miraak's strength and cunning. Think of it. Two titans clothed in the fearsome garb of dragon priests, wielding the voice like axes against each other on that desolate island coast near Solstheim. The ground screamed, gravity wept, shouts tore the fabric of reality. Fakradian ice met tortual fire force ripped against force. The very stones of Solstheim cracked under the weight of their hatred, their ambition, their power unleashed without restraint. It wasn't a duel, it was mutual annihilation crashing against mutual annihilation. The sky tore, the earth trembled, cracked, and buckled like rotting leather, and then the sea roared in a wall of water taller than mountains, and soon the land between Skyrim and the battlefield island soil dissolved, cliffs shattered, whole forests were dragged screaming into the abyss. When the waves finally receded, gasping, the land Miraak and Valak fought upon stood sundered, forever torn from the mainland. Skyrim. Solstheim was born in blood and brine, a monument to the immense power wielded in their apocalyptic battle. Miraak, real-blooded, perhaps broken. Valak pressed on. This was the end. The Prince of Fate was always watching, wasn't he? Through swirling pages and inked dark pools, Mora saw his investment poised to be smashed upon Valak's loyal altar. He could not have that. A promise unfurl from the tentacle darkness, sanctuary power, victory merely delayed, and Miraak, choked by despair, perhaps wounded beyond mortal endurance, saw Valak's relentless advance. He reached for the slimy hand outstretched from the void, flashing sickly light, the taste of stagnant ink flooding the lungs. Just as Valak struck a killing blow, Miraak vanished from Mudus, ripped away from death itself into Apocrypha, Mora's endless, ever-shifting library of forbidden whispers and rotting knowledge. He was saved, or so he thought, saved by the Daedra, whose whispers had poisoned his heart to the core. Oh, the bitter irony drips like acid, doesn't it? Hermaeus Mora welcomed his champion not to an eternity of power, but to an eternity of slow, relentless digestion. Think of the library, infinite, yes, but infinite like a prison hallway's call, like entrails, pages rustle with the sound of skittering insects. Vile black waters slosh beneath rotting bookcases. Green light casts no warmth, only decay. Where does 1,000 years begin, or for how many times has Miraak wandered corridors that shift and taunt him torture doesn't need chains? When the books themselves leer at you with knowing, hateful eyes, Mora dripped him knowledge, tantalizing scraps, secrets of the Thu'um undreamt, of power beyond measuring. But always for a price whispers became commands. MIRAAK'S desperate, furious defiance slowly curdled into bitter acceptance, and into a dependent, twisted loyalty. The Dragonborn, who wanted to break the dragons, became Mora's greatest bound servant, his eyes duller, darker, closer to the master whose tentacles slithered around his soul. Each day the mask remained, now perhaps fused to lost centuries, drifted like mold spores in that stagnant air. MIRAAK clawed back shreds of himself only by clinging to the hatred for the dragon's, hatred for Valak entombed back on Solstheim, perhaps hatred most of all for the Tamriel he could feel tauntingly distant. Through scraps of stolen power he built his cult, whispered half-truths to desperate souls. Through the veil of oblivion they saw a god. He saw only the flickering, failing spark of his original self. Then the whisper echoes through the plains. Alduin has fallen, a warning, a threat. From the long-slumbering collections rises a new searing consciousness. Another Dragonborn breathing his sky, walking his world unbound by Apocrypha's chains. The fear and the hunger to devour that soul, his own soul mirrored, did consume. What was the last of MIRAAK? Not escape. What conquest, draining the last Dragonborn's soul, would make him whole again, strong enough perhaps to finally snap Mora's tentacles clean. He reached out, he tempted, he fought through his reluctant champion. In the end, as Mora's realm threatened to finally unravel the island he once betrayed everything to rule, MIRAAK faced his successor. His fate rested on the point of her Thu'um, her soul ablaze with defiance. He fought with all the choked fury of for eras, every shot, every secret Mora had given him to keep him hopeful. He wielded pillars, crashed dragons, screamed back into submission. Power rang upon power, but the soul he craved burned to bright. His limbs grew heavy. Apocrypha's whispers turned to a sucking drain. Mora, ever watchful, saw the gambit fail, saw his pawn about to be swept away entirely. Do you think the prince hesitated? The embrace of Hermaeus Mora was like suffocating in a frigid sea of ink. Tentacles, thick as root, slick with otherworldly slime, erupted, writhing. Limbs grasped, held fast. The chill seeped into MIRAAK'S bones far deeper than any gnaw. Frost. He gasped, maybe shouted. The words died choked. They clamped over his limbs, pinning him like a specimen pinned to a collector's board, tightening, pulling back towards the churning maw of tentacles and eyes gathering in the foul air. Not a dragon priest, a prized scroll property. He kicked, he strained against the impossible, slick strength pulling him under. That greasy tide, graying green essence swirled around him. His last sight wasn't the sky he betrayed Solstheim over. It wasn't the face of his conqueror, the last Dragonborn. It was the unblinking myriad eyes of his true master, the master he despaired to all those centuries ago. The ink closes over the first Dragonborn, vanishes beneath the water's surface, offered as sacrifice not to the Daedra, but by the Daedra he first embraced. Mora claimed his prize. His books snapped shut, only bubbles rose from the murk where MIRAAK had stood, offering everything for power. He paid the ultimate cost, an eternity condemned by the very power he craved. So ends not the dragon war, but MIRAAK'S war swallowed whole. Imagine dragons reigning as gods. That was ancient Skyrim under the dragon cult. Picture imposing stone temples scraping a perpetually cold sky. Now picture always dealing mortals bow to scaled masters who viewed them as cattle, tools, or occasionally amusing playthings. The priests, they were our terrifying shepherds, chosen for their voice, their power to whom they became the enforcers of draconic decree. Their masks cold and unyielding symbolized their authority. They spoke the dragon's words, interpreted their cruelties, and ensured the mountains echoed with our subjugation. Sacrifices weren't just whispers, they were stark reality, prisoners of war, dissidents. Sometimes unlucky villagers chosen at random marched up those temple steps. The roar of a dragon meant yet another soul vanished down those gaping maws. Fear was the cult's bedrock. It wasn't just physical pain, though there was plenty. 'Twas the suffocating dread knowing your existence depended entirely on the whims of uncaring reptilian masters and their robe intermediary. As you learned obedience, learned to silence your own thoughts, or you became ashes on the wind. And among these masked enforcer stood one not bound solely by priestly duty, MIRAAK, the Dragonborn priest. Think of the awe, the absolute dread he inspired, a mortal chosen by the dragons themselves, gifted with the thune, not just any shout, but the soul-devouring power to dominate dragons themselves. He walked a razor's edge, high priest, absolutely elevated far above his brethren. He communed directly with the Dova, and they listened in their dismissive way. He interpreted the word, he enforced their dominance. He learned how to bend a lesser dragon to his will. To the common folk, he was a terrifying conduit of their overlord's power. To the other priests, he was an aberration, a mortal granted power that made him almost draconic. The taste of that specific power, the resonance in his bones every time he shouted, was uniquely his, but absolute power, absolute arrogance, especially from beings millennia old. The dragons sat atop their mountains, demanding temples be built, higher offerings be grander. They squabbled with each other over petty domains, their egos clashing like continents. Their priests weren't immune. Ambition festered under those masks. Some coveted MIRAAK'S unique closeness to the Dova. Others simply hungered for greater control over their regions, and he became a quiet poison within the cult's cold stone heart. And beneath it all, us the mortal masses, you felt it fester. The whispers grew louder in the fields, in the longhouses. Is this all we are kindling for the Dova? The fear never vanished, but a low rumble of resentment started vibrating through the pack. Earth MIRAAK saw this brittle edifice crack. He wasn't blinded. He saw the creeping rot, the senseless slaughter ordered by bored dragons, the priests growing fat on power, their cruelty exceeding even the demands of their masters. He saw the inherent fragility beneath the roar, and that dragonborn power always whispered inside him, why enforce madness? Why shouldn't he rule? That familiar shout wasn't just tyrannical obedience anymore, it was potential liberation or greater subjugation. His own the dragons kept him powerful, yes, but they anchored him. That taste of control, it started to sour. This is when the whispers started, not dragon roars, but a sickly omnipresent susurration that snaked into his thoughts, thick as swamp fog and far more treacherous. Hermaeus Mora, DAEDRIC, prince of fate, forbiddance, knowledge, and all that slithers in the darkness. Apocrypha dripped into the corners of MIRAAK'S mind. Mora didn't offer simple power, he offered understanding. He showed MIRAAK things the Dova deliberately withheld, knowledge of untapped shouts, desperately guarded dragon secrets, pathways of power woven through the constellations themselves. He promised the means to transcend, not just resist the cult, but devour it from within. He said that storm voice MIRAAK longed to master was his. Mora promised it absolute dominance, overshouting the dragon priests might know a handful of words more offered the lexicon of cosmic. Well, it was a revelation intoxicating and corrosive. The rules, the subservience he detested here, was the forbidden's key. To shatter it all, the promise itched beneath his skin. He seized it. MIRAAK didn't slip quietly into treason. He declared it. He turned his unique Dragonborn curse, the command of dragon souls, into his ultimate weapon. He shouted rebellion into the minds of lesser dragons, not persuasion, but soul-shattering. Will subjugating domination, they snapped their allegiance from their ancient masters and lunged with fang and flame against their own kind. Skyrim shook with civil war. Mortal allies, whose simmering embers of resentment found a terrifying figurehead. MIRAAK stoked this fire. He promised freedom from the DAEDRIC, but whispered promises of a new order ruled by him. He became the beacon for rebels and opportunists, painting himself as the martyr, liberator, crushing his former brethren without mercy. His mask became a symbol of defiance, drenched in the blood of priests and dragons like the dragon cult. Real, this wasn't external rebellion. This was a high priest breaking their divine order. MIRAAK wielded dragon against dragon, high priest against high priest. The betrayal was fundamentally destabilizing. Their hold was slipping. Who could they trust? Whispers of revolt spread like ice killer weed. They needed a champion. They found Valak the loyal. His loyalty was absolute, unshaken by doubt or ambition. He saw MIRAAK not as a liberator, but as the ultimate heretic, a malignancy unleashed by DAEDRIC slime. His duty became singular: cleanse the rot, put down the traitor priest. Their final confrontation wasn't just powerful, it was apocalyptic. Solstheim became their battleground, scale tipped firmly against MIRAAK. Not yet. He wielded Mora's forbidden gifts, whispers of reality bending power flickering around him like black fire. But Valak, he was steadfast, fueled by the raw conviction of preservation. Their duel wasn't fought with mere swords. Reality ripple, earth-shattering shouts collided with older, darker, while ground split asunder below them. Mountains groaned. They tore the land of Solstheim itself apart. Legends say the very sea rushed into the wounds ere conflict carved. Volcanic backlash erupted, islands shattered. It was the land screaming under the weight of their blasphemous power. Struggle and that chaos. MIRAAK vanished, pulled from the jaws of the cult's vengeance by slippery ink-stained tentacles into Apocrypha. Valak remained the guardian, holding the ruins, but Valak's victory wasn't the cult's salvation. Solstheim was sundered. The sheer devastation sent a shockwave through the cult's dominion. The myths always boasted the dragon's unshakable reign, but mortals watched the priests rip an island apart. They saw Valak indeed loyal, a pillar, but a pillar standing amidst cosmic ruin. It was undeniable proof that the priests weren't demigods and the Dova weren't invincible. They had nearly destroyed each other. If they could fight amongst themselves to such ruinous ends, perhaps mortal rebellion could succeed. The spark MIRAAK ignited became a wildfire. Skyrim erupted into the dragon war. Mortals hardened by generations of oppression realized the masters bled. They remembered MIRAAK'S defiance, terrifying though he was, and dared to raise their own axes. The cult, already rattled to its core by MIRAAK'S initial betrayal, fractured under this pressure. The monolith toppled. Mankind's desperate gamble paid off. Alduin was banished. But was MIRAAK truly gone, or just biding his time? He left bloody fingerprints everywhere. Visit Bloodskull Barrow on Solstheim. You don't just see mossy stone, you see the scars of rebellion, the encased skeleton defiant even in death. That strange red blade embedded in the floor. It thrummed with energies no clear brotherhood forged and stable violet, echoing the desperation of those last days before the cult's crushing hammer fell upon the rebels, the very weapon that could only be powered by the rage of his followers. Even rock mine worked through its treacherous depths, and you inevitably brush against whispers, architectural hints of the hidden structures. MIRAAK or Mora influenced the entire island. His dust ruins is a relic of that earth-shattering duel, the focal point of the betrayal that truly broke the dragon's spine. And Mora, he observed from the endless shelves of Apocrypha, he manipulated MIRAAK expertly, offering him the very tools needed to destroy himself and his masters. MIRAAK became the perfect catalyst, cracking the superstructure of thumb-based tyranny. Because chaos sows knowledge, the collapse of order, the breaking of monolithic power, it creates fertile ground for the forbidden. Scholars are born from the ruins of institutions. Desperate seekers clutch at answers in the dark by using MIRAAK to splinter the dragon cult's orthodoxy. Mora poisoned the wellspring of Dragonborn might and ensured future seekers of power but only reliably find it in his tentacled grasp. He traded MIRAAK the strength to ruin his world and gained untold souls hungry for dark power. Ever since MIRAAK, he thought he seized ultimate power right up, until he realized the chains had willingly forged weren't made of iron, but of oozing blasphemous books in a prison made of knowledge. His temple stands promised yet unattainable, his legacy the Dragonborn's dawn, and his eternal twilight picture is the stony beach. Under a sick green sky, waves like thick ink sloshing against jagged rocks. The air smells like old books left to rot here not by choice. In a realm of ES, and Hermaeus Mora doesn't give gifts, he gives buys time that alter. He saved course and it tore his limbs. He still felt when crawled across the floor of its set of Valak. But could Mora pulled back, he could bow MIRAAK under his TM. He could own dominion of kings over rubble patrons. Could it felt like control. While clawing at this endless reader, he learned every bound, his every wall that touched this vile artifice. His them into sprawling walked, not smiling rips in reality. The Apocrypha twisting Solstheim black books like festering worm. His words minds like them on to expose the chords. Wide open use became she. MIRAAK's tentacle curled into reach shorn centuries. Father's grimace, he saw figures, statues, a dragon soul intensify. Apocrypha, he heard desire fuse. He whispered, soul dear, J must haven't, must harness bleed focused. The leaned of gave last at moment. Mora's adorned mirrant it so. Line consume, blinking veins, door closed, rustling papers, scratched, persistent. Endlessness. Valak versus MIRAAK, the duel that shattered Solstheim. So picture Solstheim back before it was an island attached to Skyrim's north coast, just another stretch of rugged dragon rule land. Cold wind cutting through pine forests, mist clinging to volcanic slopes up there. In temples older and most kingdoms dwelled the dragon priests, masters of the voice, keepers of secrets, ruling mortals with fist of frost and fire at the dragon's command. To have then defined everything that came after MIRAAK, the first Dragonborn, and Valak, who'd one day wear the name jailer. Hard to imagine it now, but they were bound by duty once. Valak, devout, steady as the stone, he listened to the dragon's roars, saw their terrible majesty as the world's rightful order, as was a deep loyalty, not just obedience. It felt like the foundation of existence, this hierarchy. MIRAAK, that loyalty curdled. Being the first wasn't enough. He heard not commands in the dragon tongue, but teachings. He wanted to surpass. He looked at his masters and saw oppressors choking the potential. His potential freedom wasn't just some ideal for MIRAAK. Was a burning hunger deep in his dragonborn soul. His own might promised him lordship. Their rivalry festered. Valak saw the restlessness in MIRAAK'S eyes, the whispered gatherings of his favored cultists, the way his actions subtly undermined the Dova's edicts. He heard isolated words of defiance woven into the Thu'um echoes to quiet for the dragons, but clear to another priest. Sabotages occurred, sigils of warding place to hinder MIRAAK'S experiments. Critical supplies subtly misplaced. MIRAAK, ever clever, countered with his own intrigues. Bonds strained among other priests, loyal cultists vanishing after speaking against him. Valak watched. He learned, he prepared. He didn't want this conflict. Duty demanded it. He felt the impending storm like thunder trapped beneath the earth. When the clash finally came, it wasn't just two men fighting. It was tectonic plates grinding. Imagine two suns crashing into each other. MIRAAK unleashed the voice as raw power, waves of force shattering cliffs, immolating swaths of forest. He pulled creatures from oblivion, shadows twisting in the swirling ash. Valak met him shout for shout, his Thu'um a shield, a counterforce focused and unyielding. He threw up walls of shimmering ethereal energy, dispelled the summoned horrors, used the land itself as a weapon, shaking rock spires upwards to meet the sorcery flying down. The very sky split above them, ripped apart by streams of light and darkness, as they drew not just on their own souls, but on something deeper. Older draconic power surged through their veins, lending apocalyptic weight to every command. Dragons circled this maelstrom like carrion birds sensing an ending, but even they hesitated to dive into that fray. Valak and MIRAAK were equals to God's mortal, warping reality solely with their voices. Mountains cracked like rotten teeth, fire filled the valleys, the sea itself recoiled and then surged inland. The very foundations of the world buckled under the punishment. This wasn't just a duel, it was apocalypse localized. This power, this sheer destruction tipped the landmass. Solstheim tore free. A final horrifying crack echoed across Tamriel as the coast fractured. Earthquakes shattered Skyrim's northern holds. The sea roared, and a drowning wave taller than anything consuming the lowlands, carving the new channel between the wounded shores. Solstheim was ripped away, history itself reshaped, geography rewritten by the fury of two titans locked in mortal combat. MIRAAK felt the tide turning. He saw the ruin had helped unleash the terrifying might of Valak, holding firm against his ambition. He choked on ash and his own shocked doubt. Valak's voice was the sound of the world grounding itself. MIRAAK saw his centuries of careful planning, his dream of godhood about to end under a loyalist boot or shout. Desperation took him. He reached into the deepest, darkest currents of knowledge, into the realm of endless churning tides and forgotten secrets. And Hermaeus Mora answer. It was no savior, but an opportunist watching pawns. The air near MIRAAK simply parted, an impossible tear in the veil, edges like thrashing tentacles, and shifting eyes, not space, but the space between spaces. The DAEDRIC Prince of Fate didn't offer escape. He plucked an instant before Valak's earth-sundering shout could finish him. MIRAAK was gone, pulled from the ruined battlefield straight into Apocrypha's infinite morass library, leaving Valak standing alone in the roaring silence of the cataclysm. They'd made victory, hollow, terrifying victory. The traitor was gone, saved by something incomprehensibly worse. The cost was Solstheim sundered, bleeding, smoking, countless lives erased. The terror of the dragons knowing one of their own supreme servants had turned and another might challenge their hold. Valak bore the scars inside and out. He was wound gardener, scar-keeper, the battlefield, his tombstone. He understood his duty wasn't over. Miraak hadn't been destroyed. He was. Preserve the dead are offered sanctuary only because they saw play left in the game. Miraak would bide his time. He would weave plots from Apocrypha's shadows. He would return. Solstheim needed a guardian, a watchman shackle to the island itself. Valak chose his vigil. He laid his own prison. He walked into the darkness of a tomb built beneath the fractured land, near the very wounds of the sundering, and there he sat, not dead, not alive, watching. Sealed within stone his connection to the land, a net ready to feel the tremor of his ancient enemies' return. For thousands of years, long after the dragon cult shattered and Nords retook the land, he remained, spirit straining against the dark, sustained by the last grim fragments of his tomb and his oath. He wove wards into the tomb walls, puzzles and guardians fueled by his remaining power. Stories etched onto stone tablets telling of the guardian and the usurper, a warning, a history, a torch held aloft against oblivion. Nordic skalds whispered the legend. The guardian held fast to underground, keeping the usurper locked away. Some claimed to see his spectral mantle near the ruins. The very stones remembered the battle that birthed their island existence. Solstheim itself became shaped by that conflict, vulnerable to Apocrypha's creeping influence, as MIRAAK'S will pushed against the barriers of his prison refuge, defended by the ancient steadfast wards laid by a long-lost guardian. Finally the last Dragonborn walked, Solstheim drawn by prophecy and Mora's chilling whispers. The signs were everywhere, stones vibrating with suppressed malice, cultists chanting MIRAAK'S name, dragons bending knee to a ghostly phantom, and deep underground, watching the storm gather once more. The mantle over age bone stirred a resonance. Dragonborn, but could this younger soul, unbloodied by centuries of rage and ancient betrayal, succeed where he had not? Valak's ancient wards fought MIRAAK'S corrupting influence. They shielded Raven Rock, hindered the cultists, dulled the sharpest edge of MIRAAK'S call. Even bound within stone, his power resisted the first. He couldn't act, but he held back the tide. His tomb stood as the final bulwark against MIRAAK'S physical return. There Valak's living legacy, his wards, his guardians, the power etched into the very walls, tested the last, proving they were Dragonborn perhaps, or proving they were strong enough to be Solstheim's shield. Now we faced MIRAAK and Apocrypha. We finished what began millennia ago on shattered ground. We silenced MIRAAK'S final shout. Through us Valak's unending watch ended. His sacrifice accomplished its grim purpose. What became of him then? Did his spirit finally free after countless ages of stubborn vigilance? Beneath the crushing rock dissolve into the wind sigh over the geyser? Did he look upon the last Dragonborn, one born free and shackled by dragon overlords, and see not upon but the future restored? Or was there only silence, duty fulfilled, the last duty-woven thread of a scarred world finally unraveled? Valak doesn't guide us, but his crushing tomb door opened. His guardians stand down when we solve his tests. He laid the path to win the war. Solstheim bled to start. He saw the first fall to the last. His vigil was done. Silence greets us in his tomb now, just the cold stone sighing gently, holding its ancient breath. MIRAAK versus the last Dragonborn. To eras collide. Okay, settle and let's talk about Dragonborn. Not just the shout you use on a stubborn draugr, but the essence of it, the burning spark of Akatosh itself, gifted to mortals, and how that gift, that terrifying power, can twist down such wildly different paths. Look at MIRAAK, look at yourself. Last Dragonborn, the first and the final, separated by millennia, yet bound by the same dragon fire in the blood. It's chilling, isn't it, how similar you are and how profoundly different. The first Dragonborn's origins. Imagine it before the first era, before recorded history, really the Merethic era, a time choked with mist and myth where dragons weren't just beasts, they were gods. Their cult ruled Tamriel with scales and fire and terror. And into that brutal world MIRAAK was born, not just born, though chosen. Akatosh's blessing didn't descend on him amidst prophecy or fanfare. 'Twas a silent, profound gift bestowed in an age lost to time. Think about that weight, the very first, no legends to guide him, no graybeards chanting from their mountain, just him and the voice thrumming in his bones, and the dragons looming over everything. He didn't start as a rebel, you know. That's the twist, his power, the power to let you defy Alduin himself. MIRAAK used it to enforce the dragon cult's rule. He was their ultimate enforcer, a living weapon wielded by the dragons against humanity. Can you feel the irony? The Dragonborn born to dominate dragons, instead dominating mortals. For dragons he walked among the priests, his doom silencing dissent, his presence a chilling symbol of the cult's absolute power. He was the peril embodied proof that Akatosh's gift, untethered by conscience or purpose, is just another chain, a chain MIRAAK wore willingly at first. He represented the raw, terrifying potential of what you are, power absolute, directionless, ripe for corruption. The brightest flame casts the darkest shadow to the last Dragonborn's destiny. Now shift gears, fourth era, Skyrim, bleak fracture, cold dragons return, black wings blotting out the sun, heralding the world eater's return, and you emerge not silent, not hidden, prophesied shout from the throat of the world. The last Dragonborn, your birthright isn't shrouded in Merethic mist, it's screened by dragons and etched onto ancient elder scrolls. Your power arrives amidst chaos, a desperate answer to Alduin's roar. Your motives starkly different from MIRAAK'S origins. You weren't born into a cult's embrace. You were likely just someone, a hunter, a thief, a soldier lost in the snow. Then destiny grabs you by the throat. Your power isn't wielded to enslave, it's forged in the crucible of survival, then honed for defiance. You fight dragons, you absorb them, their souls burn within you, fueling your strength. That's the core divergence, isn't it? MIRAAK'S power began as a tool of oppression. Yours ignites as a weapon of liberation. You face Alduin not for dominion, but for survival. Yours Skyrim's Tamriel's, yet feel the echoes. The shared blood sings, you know, the way the dragons roar washes over you, inspiring, oh, not terror, the instinctive understanding of their tongue, the raw visceral pull when a dragon soul tears free and slams into you, a surge of ancient fire. You wield the thum like he did, bending reality. With a shout, you stand before the world eater, unflinching, just as MIRAAK once stood before his masters. The potential, it's identical, the same. Furnace burns in both your chests. What you forge with it, that's where the paths fork violently. 3 Hermaeus Mora's manipulation. Enter the gardener of men, the keeper of forbidden knowledge. Hermaeus Mora, he watches, always sees the potential in the Dragonborn soul. He saw it in MIRAAK millennia ago. He sees it in you, and oh, how he tempts forbidden knowledge. It's Mora's sweetest poison. Think of the Ben will shout the power to dominate dragons, mortals' minds. MIRAAK craved. It needed it for his rebellion, his bid to overthrow the dragons and seize their throne. Mora dangled it before him in the shifting halls of Apocrypha, shimmering lure of absolute control. MIRAAK grasped it, drank deep from Mora's black library, believing himself the master. he was wrong. The knowledge seeped into him, twisted him. Mora didn't just give him power, he planted seeds of corruption, nurtured MIRAAK'S pride and ambition until it choked out everything else. The first Dragonborn became less a rebel, more a petulant prince ruling a corner of Apocrypha, dreaming of a conquest he could never truly achieve alone. He succumbed utterly. Now Mora turns his countless eyes to you. The whispers start, don't they? Through Septimus Cygnus, his mad vessel, through black books lying like traps in ancient ruins, the same offer power beyond imagining, secrets lost to time. The rest of Mora doesn't care who wields the power, only that he controls the wielder. He plays the long game, using MIRAAK to weaken dragonkind from within during the Dragon War, using you to finish the job Alduin started. Mora pits you against MIRAAK, not out of spite, but as a gardener prunes competing shoots. Only the strongest tool survives his endgame, simple dominion, by controlling the first and last Dragonborn, by hoarding the knowledge that fuels their power. He seeks to pull the strings of all mortal affairs from his endless library. You are both magnificent weapons and potential rivals he must neutralize for legacy defined by choice. So here you stand, last Dragonborn, face to face with the ghost of the first MIRAAK. Isn't just a boss fight at the end of a DLC. Haze your reflection, an accursed mirror, a living, breathing cautionary tale. He shows you the abyss that awaits if you let the power consume you, if pride eclipses purpose. If you listen too closely to the whispers from oblivion, his legacy is one of wasted potential, of a gift perverted into chains forged by DAEDRIC hands. He is the peril you carry within you, but your legacy is unwritten. Its choice more offers you the same poison chalice he offered MIRAAK. Will secret's power. You can take it, embrace it, become another MIRAAK, perhaps stronger, ruling a different corner of Mora's realm. Or you can defy him, use the knowledge gained, maybe even the power of will itself, but refuse to kneel, seal the book, walk away from Apocrypha's lure. Your impact resonates. Now you decide Skyrim's fate against Alduin. You shape the balance of power among mortals, dragons, and Daedra. Will you be a guardian, a conqueror, another pawn, or something entirely new? You and MIRAAK are bookends on Tamriel's bloody history. He marks the terrifying dawn of the Dragonborn, born into darkness under dragon wings. You stand at what feels like the twilight, facing the world eaters. Return the first sought dominion and became enslaved. The last fights for survival, for freedom. What you do with that freedom defines everything. MIRAAK'S shadow stretches long across the ages, a stark warning etched in dragon fire and betrayal. Your light, well, that's yours to kindle. Will it be a beacon or just another flicker consumed by the endless dark? The power is the same, the blood is the same. The choice, last Dragonborn, is eternally, terrifyingly yours. Hermaeus Mora, you know his name, prince of secrets, keeper of forbidden knowledge. What do you truly grasp his nature? He isn't just some librarian in the void. He's a predator, an anglerfish dangling luminous secrets in the infinite dark, waiting for ambitious souls like MIRAAK to bite his entire realm. Apocrypha, an endless library of writhing tentacles and shifting pages. It's a trap, a beautiful, mesmerizing trap designed for one purpose: to consume, to hoard not just knowledge, but the very minds that seek it, twisting them into extensions of his own will, expanding his influence one corrupted soul at a time. Think about MIRAAK'S time. The dragon cult ruled Skyrim with an iron fist, their thumb shaking the mountains. MIRAAK was powerful, yes, a dragonborn priest, but power breeds ambition, And ambition breeds vulnerability. Mora saw that flicker in MIRAAK'S soul, that hunger to rise above his masters, to know more than the dragons permitted. That's what Mora targets, not weakness, but strength twisted by desire. He didn't send a herald, he planted seeds ancient, texts, fragments of power, whispers hidden within the dragon cult's own libraries. Hermaeus Mora's black books, they weren't lost, they were placed lures scattered across Tamriel and time itself, each one a doorway crafted for a specific kind of hunger. MIRAAK'S hunger was immense, and so the lower caste for him was irresistible. It starts so reasonably, doesn't it? MIRAAK finds a text, perhaps seeking an edge against a rival priest or a rebellious dragon, just a fragment, a sliver of power the dragons hadn't taught him. More offers it freely, a secret to bend a will, a whisper of a shout to shatter stone. Success tastes sweet, but knowledge, especially forbidden knowledge, is addictive. Each secret solved unlocks a deeper mystery, a more potent technique just out of reach. You convince yourself you're still in control. You need that secret to survive. You need this one to truly master your power. Mora feeds the addiction. Drip by drip, each revelation comes with a subtle hook, a tendril of Apocrypha's essence, finding its way into MIRAAK'S mind. Autonomy slips away, traded piece by piece for power. He becomes Mora's champion, believing he's a partner, a chosen one, but a champion chosen by Mora is just a favor slave. The title is another shackle, gilded and heavy, and then Apocrypha itself takes hold, trapped within its endless shifting stacks, surrounded by the rustle of unseen things and the whispers of trapped seekers. Time loses meaning, centuries blur into millennia. The realm isn't just a prison, it's an alembic. It distills the mind. MIRAAK'S thoughts, his desires, his very sense of self are slowly reshaped by the ambient hunger and despair of Apocrypha, by the constant pressure of Mora's presence. The Dragonborn, who entered proud and defiant, becomes something else entirely, a creature perfectly adapted to the ink-stained darkness. His ambition now solely focused on fulfilling his master's design. The realm remade him from the inside out into Mora's perfect instrument, and what an instrument! He became stranded in Apocrypha, yet his reach extended back to Tamriel. How through the cultists, those masked figures chanting on Solstheim's shores, they weren't just worshippers, they were extensions of MIRAAK'S will, mind-slaved puppets acting on impulses, whispered directly from Apocrypha. Their purpose to build monuments, those strange pulsating stones scattered across Solstheim, not just monuments to Mora, but anchors, conduits, each stone placed with terrifying precision, tapped into the ancient Allmaker stones, the sacred heartbeats of Solstheim itself. MIRAAK wasn't just siphoning power, he was stitching Apocrypha's fabric onto Tamriel's reality, using the island's own life force to pull his prison realm closer, to make his eventual return possible. It's a violation, a slow poisoning of the land orchestrated from a timeless library, but anchoring Apocrypha wasn't enough. MIRAAK needed strength, raw divine power to claw his way fully back into the world. And he knew the source dragon souls. Are you the last Dragonborn fought Alduin? MIRAAK lurked in the shadows of Apocrypha. Every time you felled a dragon, every time that soul rushed toward you, he intercepted it with a whisper, a gesture fueled by millennia of stolen knowledge and Mora's direct patronage. He snatched it away, he stole your victories, your power siphoned through the very connection that binds Dragonborn to dragon. Each stolen soul was a brick in the bridge he was building back to earn fuel for his rebellion against his own masters, or so he desperately needed to believe. That's the cruelest joke Mora plays. He fosters the delusion of freedom. Miraak, even at the height of his power, stealing dragon souls and bending Solstheim to his will, was utterly dependent. Every scrap of knowledge, every ounce of power he wielded to defy the dragons and plan his escape flowed directly from Apocrypha, from Hermaeus Mora's endless hoard. Miraak clung to the belief that he was unique, that he could outwit the Prince of Fate, that he could use Mora's gifts and then turn on his master. His pathetic, tragic arrogance. Mora allowed the rebellion nurture it, even because it served his purpose. Miraak's struggle, his grand plan, was just another chapter. Mora was writing another experiment in corruption. The Dragonborn who dreamed of godhood was, until the very end, flipping pages Mora had already inscribed. Doesn't that echo feel familiar? Think about your own journey. Mora approaches you to he offers power, secret solutions to problems that seem insurmountable. The black books call you, promising forbidden knowledge, shouts of immense power, ways to bend the wills of others. The path Miraak walked is laid out before you. Will you resist the lure, or will you step by step, bargain by bargain, repeat his mistakes? Mora watches, countless eyes blinking in the gloom, because he knows the allure is timeless. Ambition, desperation, the thirst for power, these are constants. Hayes played this game for eternity, and here is the chilling truth, the ultimate lesson in dealing with the gardener of men. Mora wins. Always look at the end. On Solstheim you face Miraak, the first Dragonborn, and a titanic clash. Whether you resist Mora's whispers or embrace them, whether you defeat Miraak alone or accept Mora's aid, to do it, the outcome serves the DAEDRIC Prince. If Miraak wins, he returns to Nirn, utterly Mora's creature, a font of Dragonborn knowledge now fully under the Prince's control. If you win Miraak's soul, his millennia of accumulated secrets and stolen power is consumed by Mora, and your soul you walk away. Perhaps, but you've touched Apocrypha deeply. You've wielded its power, learned its secrets. That knowledge is now part of you and part of Hermaeus Mora's hoard by extension. He has feasted on Miraak's essence, and he has tasted yours. He gained the Dragonborn's worth of secrets, regardless of who stood triumphant on that shifting platform. That's the nature of forbidden knowledge and DAEDRIC bargains. The cost is always your soul, piece by piece. Even if you think you walked away free, Hermaeus Mora never loses. He only collects you. Feel Solstheim first, not as Skyrim feels. The chill northern air bites different here, sharper, older, like the stone remembers. Look out east across the churning sea that wasn't always the shore, those jagged teeth of rock breaching the gray waves. That's not coastline, that's a wound, the broken coast. That's where Solstheim tore itself free, ripped away from the mainland by forces beyond reckoning. You know the legend, don't you? The dragon priest wore that titanic clash of wills. Miraak, Valak, howling incantations unleashed not merely fire and frost, but reality rent asunder this coast. It's the scar they left on Tamriel itself, a permanent reminder long before the Red Mountain choked the south and ash. Solstheim was broken because of him. Walk inland, the very ground groans, tremors run through the ash, and settling deeper things, they call them earthquakes, natural movements of the earth. But listen close, feel it, it's an echo, a shiver down Solstheim's spine, remembering the magic that smashed mountains and carved valleys. The land fought Dragonborn against Dragonborn. That energy is never entirely settled and hidden deceptively. Come lies Valak's tomb. Don't call it just a crypt. This was Solstheim's anchor. This is where the guardian stood, where the true battle raged. After Solstheim's sundering walls, thick not just with stone, but with containment magic. Every carving, every twisted passage whispers of a singular purpose to hold him, keep MIRAAK down for millennia. This tomb wasn't just a monument. It was a failure. Valak kept MIRAAK bound, yes, but bound here, not truly gone. His watching prison became the lock on Solstheim's heartache. Then you see the temple of MIRAAK. Wrongness pours off it atop that plateau, dominating the horizon. Wasn't built of dragon shout and gnawed labor like other ruins. This emerged, it grew like something cancerous, forcing its way through the bedrock, twisted tendrils of obsidian stone, writhing under Apocrypha's impossible green-black sky. You can feel Mora's presence steaming from its walls, thick as the swirling vapor that drifts around its spires. That isn't stone born of Nirn, it's solidified conjecture, solidified nightmare. Hermaeus Mora coughed this temple onto the land, a monument to his pact with the betrayer, and the old places, they aren't safe anymore. Wander those familiar gnawed ruins scattered across the island. You'll find the Draugr, the ironwork, but then carved over ancient tombs, fresh and sickly scaled patterns like Arley serpents, hints of the tentacle, the grasping claw, symbols that whisper Hermaeus Mora. They repurposed the sacred, the old stonework, made it sing a new hymn, his hymn, MIRAAK'S hymn. They forced the venerable dragon cult tombs to venerate Apocrypha's keeper. Is a desecration written deep in the rock. The all-maker's stones, you find them one nestled near the Skull village, pure, humming with a different power. The others, corruption sucks at your boots. When you approach them, rings of sickly stone teeth erupting from the ground, hooked and sharp green miasma clings to the air. Can you feel the thrum, not the land's steady pulse, something deeper, hungrier, something scraping at the walls of the world? These sacred sites, sakas of the land's spirit, MIRAAK'S touch turned them inside out, made them keys dredging power from Apocrypha itself, draining Solstheim's life to feed his ambitions. Every moment you stand near a corrupted stone, you feel Solstheim bleeding to feed that ancient ghost. Ask the Skull, sit quietly by their fire, listen to the wind tugging at the lodge timbers. Elders speak in low voices, faces grim. They call him the traitor, the false dragonborn. Long millennia have held the tale close, how might turned against wisdom, how the one blessed with kind's voice used it to enslave the very land and Skull themselves. Their stories, art histories in dusty books, their warnings carried in the blood, etched by firelight onto each new generation. To them MIRAAK, his legend, haze the shadow still flickering at the edge of the hearthlight. The poison remembered in the root step into Raven Rock, talk to the Dunmer, rebuilding their lives. The sharp edge, the tired bitterness, it comes from deeper roots than Red Mountain. Long before their ancestors fled here, Solstheim was a place of crushing magic, a battleground of gods and mythic villains. They feel it, that ingrained mistrust of wild sorcery, of entities promising power. Ashlanders might bargain with Daedra, but the folk of Solstheim, that place, teaches caution baked into the ash. They farm every tremor, every sickly green wound in the northern hills. Whispers why trusting such paths leads only to ruin. Solstheim's trauma sculpted their caution, and there are the quiet ones, the husks. Tourists sometimes mistake them for simple hermits, those figures standing silent, sentinel over MIRAAK'S temple, or worse, shuffling near the corrupted stones, murmuring low, lost, not praying, reciting, empty eyes holding just a sliver of that sickly Apocrypha glow. These souls, farmhands, trappers, maybe someone who set out exploring and never truly returned. MIRAAK doesn't need temples full of believers. His will leeches across the centuries, his whispers slip into the dreams of the vulnerable. He needs only hands to repair his monument, hands to maintain the stones, pulling Mora's bower into the world, hands waiting for their true master's final return. He turned Solstheim itself into a beacon for slaves gathering for the end. Then you, the last Dragonborn. You walk into this, you breathe the Ashok air thick with history and hatred, and you act. Isn't that always the way you stand before those corrupted stones, repulsing the land? Your tomb washes over them like cleansing fire, like Kind's breath itself, snapping chains at impossible, awful stonework. Recoils, light returns, the stones groan and relief tangible. The malignant architecture recoils from the force of your voice. Corruption flakes away like diseased scabs. The unholy carvings practically hiss. The dread power flowing from Apocrypha falters. You see the cultist husks nearby stagger, consciousness flickering back into eyes that only knew endless gray servitude. You see the shock return before the fear, the realization they've been puppets for a god they never knew. You confront his impossible monument. You rend the sky, rip through the veil, head reinforced over centuries. You drag Miraak himself out of Apocrypha's slime. You finish what Valak began an age ago. You end the traitor on the shores of his false paradise. The silence that follows it's profound, not empty. Relieve, look around. Afterwards, truly look, the air doesn't hum with that low, dreadful pressure near the stones. Anymore they stand cleansed, solemn, radiating a quiet warmth that simply wasn't there before. Sunlight seems to pierce the ash haze a little clearer. The skulls speak of the land healing, a deep sigh running through the trees, and stoned Solstheim breathes easier. The constant ache in its roots from Miraak's leeching power finally eased Valak's tomb. It feels different, to like a watchman who finally laid down a burden millennia old. Its presence shifts from constant vigilance to rest, but demons grant gifts with poisoned barbs. True Solstheim bears new marks, deep fiery scars like ruptures in the land's skin, glowing that sickly familiar green. Apocrypha's gleam pulses from within. Hermaeus Mora didn't leave just because you cast down his instrument. The rifts remain savage wounds, sinking into Solstheim's art. Tendrils of raw Apocrypha flicker at their edges. Whispers drip from them, faint but insistent reminders that the gardener of men always tended this plot. Miraak was but one recent strand of its uncanny design. He is Ash, now the architect of Solstheim's suffering is forgiven. Reckon with balance to scars he carved run deeper, and those jagged coastal rocks, broken land poisoned ruins. The weight of memory in the skull's eyes that tremble in the earth, recalling that ancient duel. Silent servants scattered, the very stones bear his touch. History bleeds here. Miraak wasn't just defeated, he rearranged Solstheim. He reshaped its soul. Whether the Skyrim you hail from echoes with Nordic songs or Imperial Kun, whether you've peered into the books of Hermaeus Mora or not, this island holds its history close. Written in ash and agony, his name is the ghost and the stone. Remember the quiet ones, remember the scars that whisper. The rifts still gaze from the deep. Remember the traitor